So I'm going to set a disorder marker for this guy. I took off one to escort the prisoners off the field. I took 2 off of this guy. I think that's pretty close to what the result would be if I worked this out the long way. So moving over here, let's handle some missile fire. This would be 10 figures of these javelineers throwing at these heavy footmen. If we call them fully armored, which I think we might, 10 figures firing, and I rolled a dice. I got a 3. They either do 1 or 2 casualties. In this case, they would do 1. Now let's take a look at the result with WRG. We've got 5 figures only allowed to fire. This is javelin versus heavy foot. So missile fire weapon factor is hand hurled versus heavy foot is a 3. So we're going to give ourselves 3. We got to do a random factor here. This is missile fire, right? So it's going to be 1, 2, or 3, depending on what this is. So 4. This represents the attacker. He's irregular, so we keep the 1. So it's a -3, which turns that into a factor of 1. Because remember, the progression for missile factor is 1, 2, or 3. So that takes us up to 4. Let's just make it 4. These guys are not moving more than 6 inches. I don't think any tactical factors come into play here. Those guys are unshielded because they are carrying 2 armed weapons, so that'll take us up to 5. So factors 5, total factor is 5, and figures allowed to throw are 5. And again, we get a 5 and 5. That's going to be 52, which is a bit overpowered here. That's going to end up doing, two figures, which, okay, that's within the realm of chainmail. And we also forget the chainmail lets you fire twice, so if these guys would have stayed stationary. Anyway, 2 figures, and they rolled a 9. I keep rolling with low numbers with these new dice that I got, so I think they may be a little overpowered for this exercise, but let's just assume we did 2 figures casualties. That's going to force a reaction test for that guy. His reaction test, well, that's very poor. That's very poor. He only rolled a 6. So let's see if we, let's see what happens when we do the reaction test. So the reaction test here is going to be pretty close. So they are at 75% strength, right? So they still are going to be rolling all 3 dice. They are suffering missile fire and lack cover, so -1. However, the noble is attached to this group of 2, so I'm going to give them the +1. So that takes us back to 0. Unit has flank support, so yes, he's got 1 unit of flank support. He doesn't have rear support, but he does have potentially cover from this unit, so that'll bump him up 2 more. Because even though this unit is firing over here, potentially it could cover his withdrawal if the situation got out of hand. So he feels confident. That puts him up to 8. And 8, this unit does have orders. He is a grade C with an 8. Halt 2 turns, so not a horrible result here, so we'll just put 2. He's stuck there. He's stuck there. And now I'll move the unit into melee. All right, so these light units are trying to come to grips with these heavy footmen. That means they're punching up a class. That means I am going to require them to take a reaction test. And I did go back, and this is WRG2, and it says, before attempting to come to close quarters fighting, if so ordered, which they were, on every occasion. I was thinking maybe it could only apply at first time. I think I might add on every occasion to version 2, just to make sure that that's clear in everybody's mind. So both those units are going to require reaction tests. So the one on this side gets a 7, 8. And we're going to roll for the other side now. And that's, again, an 8. Amazing how this works out. I think the math is going to work out that because they're mutually supporting, that bumps them both up to a 9. This guy is actually a 10. Let's just offhand without adding any other factors. And they are within 15 inches of their ward commander, but he's not directly attached. So I think we're looking at grade C here. And I said a 10 or a 9. So the 9 would halt for 2 turns. The 10 would persevere if already is engaged in combat, otherwise continues with the active order. I think the result here, I'm just going to move them in. Oh, missileers. Yeah, these these guys can potentially give missile fire support. They're within 10 inches, so that would bump them up both another 2. So yes, they can both drive in here and engage a melee. Okay, before we do this messy melee, let's handle these missile fire shots. So these are all crossbowmen that haven't moved, and they do have missileers in the front and back ranks. So under chainmail, we'd be looking at a crap ton here, right? So 5, 10, 15, 20, 23, 27 figures, because they got a master of bows telling them, hey, shoot that middle guy. All 27 of them would be concentrating their fire. Let's treat them as heavy. 17 to 20. So there's no group for this, so I'd have to divide this into even groups. So 13 and 14. So 2 or 3 casualties. So the first shot does 2. Second shot does 3. So that would be 5 casualties. So I'm just going to put a 5 over here to denote what it would be under chainmail. So that unit would be basically almost decimated, since there are only six figures left. Now let's look at it under WRG, how many casualties we get. So crossbowmen, in this case, we only have 15 because we're only allowed to take the front rank. They're firing directly, so none of that matters. Tactical factors. The enemy hasn't moved. They get a +1 for the bows. Those are unshielded troops, so if heavy footmen fighting without shields, that's a +2, so that's actually +3 we're getting for tactical factors. +3 for tactical factors. They're not disordered or distracted. They're not pursued. So +3 for tactical factors. Let's get our random factor here. So random factor, I could do it 3 times. I'm just going to do it once. 4 and 4. That ends up being 0, which turns out to be 2. So we're up to 5 for the random and tactical factors. And then lastly, we're doing crossbowmen versus heavy foot. These are heavy crossbowmen versus heavy foot. That's a 5. So that takes us to 10. 10 with 15 figures firing. 10 with 15 figures firing. So the way we do that is we do 10 figures firing and 5 figures firing. But factors of 10 with 5 figures firing is 80, with 10 figures 114. So that's 194 divided by 20. That's going to be 194 divided by 20. Ha! Can't do it. So that's 5 and 4, right? With a remainder of 4. So that's 9 figures. 9 figures casualties. So difference between 5 and... I think I do need to tone this down just a little bit. I'm close, but I'm not zoomed in here. So let me go do some math and redo this table. I have a new casualty result table, combat results table, CRT. Let's see how this combat goes again. So recalling back, we had factors of 10, 15 crossbowmen firing. So if we come here to factors of 10, that is going to be 86 plus 52. That's going to be 138. 138 is going to be 5, 6, and most likely 7 casualties, whereas before it was 6 for chainmail. So I think we're tuned in now, much better. Most likely 7 casualties. Yes, 7 casualties. These dice always seem to roll low. Yeah. So I will remove this entire block from existence and move on. We are doing things out of order, so if it comes up that we need a reaction test, we've already handled the missile phase. We haven't done these melees, but I do need to go ahead and test out the missile stuff. So I'm going to fire this shot over here. So 6 missileers shooting at heavy horse. Let's see what chainmail would say. So heavy horse is definitely fully armored. We've only got 6 figures firing. That would only do potentially 1 casualty if I roll a 5 or 6. And I did not, so 0 casualties. Now let's take a look at what we get with WRG with these new rules. So we're talking about longbowman versus heavy horse with metal barding is a factor of 3. So factors of 3. We need a random factor here. These are regular troops versus regular troops. So this 6 now becomes a 4, which makes this a -1. If you recall, the progression for missile troops is 1, 2, or 3, so this is actually a factor of 1, so this bumps up to 4. Those are going to move not 6 inches, so I don't think we have to apply a tactical factor here. Let's see. They don't have master bows. Those aren't considered unshielded. And we've got no disorder, nothing like that, so factors of 4 figures 6. Factor 4 figures 6. So 18 casualties, which is not quite 1. This seems more in line as well. So we roll the dice, we get a 9. Again, rolling low consistently here with these dice. So we're going to remove a figure over here from the back row. And we're going to call that shot good. Now let's look at our last shot that I see that we have for now on the board, and that is the 6 long bowmen versus these Welsh spearmen over here. You can't shoot into the front rank of melee, but you can shoot into the rear rank indirectly, which they're easily within range. The indirect will suffer a -1 penalty, so they start in the hole. Let's do the random factor here. So random factor 5 and 5, that ends up being a 0, which would be factor of 2. Then they're 1 in the hole for firing indirectly. Let's see what other tactical factors apply. 6 inches not applying. Master bows doesn't apply. Unshielded troops. Yes, those are unshielded troops, I think. That's the Orcust faction. Welsh spearmen, LMI. Doesn't say anything about a shield, so we're going to consider those to be unshielded. That'll take us back up to 2. Longbowmen versus LMI, so that's going to be light medium infantry. We're going to consider that to be, well, they're packed in tightly. So Lightfoot would be 1, but they're packed in tightly, so it's going to be 5. So that takes us up to a 7 total. Factor 7 with 6 firers is going to be 31 casualties. So that's going to be 1 plus most likely a 2nd casualty. Nope, just 1 casualty. Now, if we were doing this in chainmail, and we considered those guys half armored and 6 figures, we would do 2 casualties. So again, we could have got 1 or 2 using this CRT, and we've got 2 casualties versus chainmail. So I think we're closer here.